Welcome back to the Grand Solar Minimum channel. Today is Friday, January 25th, 2019. Let's take a look at our solar wind speeds right now over here at thegrandsolarminimum.com on our space weather section. Solar wind speed coming in around at 547.9 kilometers, and at last check the density is standing around 5.2. Let's take a look at our KP indices for today, January 25th. I'll click on this real fast. Here we go. They have not been updated, but I have seen we are not at storm conditions at this point in time. However, space weather conditions, also spaceweather.com saying we are looking at a KP of 2 with a 24-hour max of 3. All right. And this is 2733, AR 2733, the last of a sunspot for solar cycle 24. Now, according to spaceweather.com, this is predicted to be the last big sunspot of solar cycle 24. So that's a bold statement, and we will continue to watch that as well to see when solar cycle 25 does begin. Let's take a look at the SDO in motion. There is AR 2733 in plain sight. And like I said, spaceweather.com believes that this will be the last big sunspot of solar cycle 24. As we look at the SDO, we see that brief coronal hole that I was talking about last night. And it does show some improvement as far as how wide it's getting. Now, remember, from width of the coronal hole, the faster the solar wind speeds. Right here, not really that impressive, but as it shows in further parts of this video here, it does look like there's a chance that we see more of a coronal hole forming just before it gets Earth facing. So we'll keep an eye on that. But as far as the current G1 storm, which has ended already, and let's take a look at what we might have coming in our direction in the near future. And there appears to be a bright active region over the eastern limb approaching here in a few days. But again, it just seems like everything that we've had on that side of the sun, once it enters Earth-facing direction, we start to see a decrease in the activity from the region. So still looking at AR 2733 for now, decaying and turning away from Earth, and we will let you know in the next sunspot if there is one for a little while. TSI dropped only slightly to 1360.65. Now that is as of January 17th, 2019. Last time we reported, we were looking at TSI last night at 1360.67, and that was for the 16th of January. All right, let's get into some headlines. Not a whole lot to go over tonight, but Mari did a piece for Watchers.news over all of the volcanoes, and I can only think that that video might have inspired this article write-up. And this is going to go over earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanoes. Notable features of the year were intense seismic activity in Indonesia, a string of disasters in Japan, floods in India, and very significant, eventful year in volcanic activity, which resulted in more deaths that have occurred in the previous 18 years combined. Interesting fact. Wildfires, these events continue to occupy the headlines. And he's absolutely correct. Now, 20 events when it comes to earthquakes and tsunamis through 2018. These are just the significant earthquakes and tsunamis. Earthquakes and tsunamis have been the deadliest disaster in the 21st century, and this trend continued in 2018. The concentration of the damage was Southeast Asia, Malaysia, specifically in Indonesia, Papua New Guinea, respectively. In the earlier months of the year, a string of earthquakes in Papua New Guinea left 181 dead and affected over 500,000 people, many of whom lived in remote highlands which were difficult to reach by aid and rescue operations. In Indonesia, the island of Lombok suffered multiple earthquakes, the deadliest being on August 5th, which killed 564 people. On September 28th, an earthquake triggered mudflows and a tsunami on the island Sulawesi, killing 3,400, making it the deadliest disaster of 2018. And unfortunately, we do have Sulawesi in the headlines once again. Sulawesi. I do apologize if I'm pronouncing it wrong. Storms, 84 events every year. Storms impact millions of people and create billions of dollars in damage. In 2018 was the same. 2 major storms struck the United States. They're talking about the 2 hurricanes. While Asia, China, India, Japan, the Philippines face extensive damage from multiple storms, and especially the Philippines. It seemed like we were reporting on a typhoon almost on a weekly basis, a stronger one than the last. Anticipated that storms, particularly due to Hurricanes Florence, $14 billion. Michael, $16 billion. Typhoon Jebi was $12.5 billion in U.S. These will be the costliest disasters of 2018 of any kind of type whatsoever. Interesting. I want to throw this out here as well. $14 billion in Florence and $16 billion. That's $30 billion in disaster. Now, we just heard that the government will be opened once again, and in the bill is $18 billion for disaster aid for Michael and Florence. And $18 billion doesn't even come close to the exact total or the roundabout total of disaster, which cost them. And which leads me to my point that both sides, whoever you are supporting in this situation, but even the Democrats seem to be just as disconnected from reality, especially when you look at the bill that they passed, that they wanted to pass, that only gives $18 billion in disaster funding for areas where are looking at $30 billion of damage. I guess they would have to let one state get $10 billion for this, or I'm sorry, one storm gets the $10 billion, which would be Michael, and Florence would get $6 billion if you had to split it up, evenly, or I'm sorry, $8 billion. But just a huge disconnect in our government right now when they've just passed a bill to fund only $18 billion towards natural disasters when just these 2 storms. And, this doesn't even talk about the disaster money that we needed for the winter storms that we had. Winter Storm Riley, Skylar, the nor'easters that we were getting pounded with. We got 4 or 5 in 1 month. So lots of weather to talk about. But unfortunately, like I'm just pointing out here, again, still, no matter whether you're for or against a wall, when you look at the mentality of the Democratic Party and the bill they just passed, it barely covers half of the cost of the natural disasters. And I know you're probably saying, well, that's what insurance is for, and then people pay for the rest out of their pocket. But still, huge disconnect when a lot of these people who probably don't have insurance that's going to cover this kind of damage. And I also wonder too, Maury, maybe this is something to look into as far as what kind of damage Kilauea did this year from its volcanic eruption. How much did that cost? And that should be included with the totals for the United States as far as when it comes to disaster money. So just a small note there. Floods. Overall, floods have affected more people than any other type of natural hazard in the 21st century, including 2018. Overall, there was a respite from floods in 2018 with Bangladesh, Pakistan, Vietnam, which often face relentless floods, reporting fewer events this year. However, major floods were reported in other countries. Somalia, which is already suffering from ongoing conflict, over 700,000 people were affected by flooding, while in Nigeria, costing over 300 lives and impacted nearly 4 million people. In Japan, heavy rains triggered the deadliest floods since 1982, killing 230 people. The August flooding of India's Kerala state was by far the largest flood event of the year, with 504 people dead and over 2/3 of the state's residents affected. That's over 23 million people. Currently, the CRED is undertaking epidemiological study in this region to investigate the impacts of flooding on gender and disease. Volcanic, 7 major events. We had way more than 7 to repeat in the volcano recap of 2018, but volcanic activity rarely makes headlines and has minimal impacts since the turn of the century. However, in 2018, This natural hazard resulted in more deaths than had occurred in the previous 18 years combined. Again, that's a number we've seen again. 18 years combined in this study. Fuego killed 400 people in 18, affected over 1.7 million people. While late in December, eruption in Anak Krakatau in Indonesia triggered a small tsunami that killed 400 people in the islands of Sumatra and Java. Other volcanic activity I think that was worth mentioning is Kilauea. It's had a history of erupting the way it does. That's normal for this volcano, but still a sight to be seen as far as nature goes. We saw quite the scene over there in Kilauea. And then, of course, here recently, which is not part of 2018, but it seems like at the end of 2018, we started to see a more uptick in 50,000-foot ash plume eruptions. And we started to see a little bit more uptick in that at the end of December. And here in January, we've already talked about 4 or 5 50,000-foot, and really anything 30,000 feet and above has actually been on the uptick as of late. Droughts and extreme temperatures, 39 events. Again, interesting though. And I'll go back to this here in a minute. They've got the death toll numbers here. They compare them by years past. Interesting looking at some of these numbers though. 2010 Haiti earthquake, our last big minimum. Russian heat wave, Somalia drought. I go back to 2000. You're getting these big death totals. I also noticed some have a correlation with minimums. The one thing that I'm a little disappointed with, I love you over there, but I'm a little disappointed that we didn't get the cold weather report, because there was a ton of records that were also dropped in 2018 for cold temperatures. For the overall trend of 2018, if we go to drroyspencer.com, we peaked out October of 2017 of 0.63, and we have steadily declined and are now sitting at the plus 0.23 degrees above baseline. So to me, I think that 2018 was a significant year in cooling, considering that you were over a half degree over baseline just at the ending part of 2017, and to drop as much as we've dropped since then, that's a full 0.42 degrees Celsius. That's an impressive drop in a year in 3 months. So that's probably the only critique I have. This article is excellent otherwise, really kind of just putting a cap on all of these wildfires, heat waves, droughts. We'll mention the droughts. The impact of the climate change on human populations will increasingly be felt through catastrophic phenomena such as drought and extreme temperatures. The human repercussions of these events, as experienced by the EMT, are poorly reported, especially from low-income countries. This is part due to methodological difficulties in registering deaths and severe consequences caused by droughts and extreme. Let's see, 3 million people were affected by ongoing drought in Kenya. Afghanistan suffered drought, impacting 2.2 million people. Central America droughts, 2.5 million people. And let's see, here's my point about this. Droughts happen, even during grand solar minimums. So the biggest thing that sticks out in my head on this right here, where the other debate that we have in the community is what causes more death, heat or cold. And in this entire article here, in this paragraph about heat and extreme droughts and temperature rise, we're not talking about any deaths in this paragraph. And health issues were a problem. I'm sure people have plenty of heat stroke, but I'm just pointing that out, that we are not reporting any deaths related to these major 39 events that happened last year in 2018. And I'm pretty sure that we would find that a different result if we discussed the cold records, and maybe that's some more research we can do here at the channel. Find out what we had as far as cold records last year, snow events, and unfortunately deaths and injuries, and of course damaged structures. Look, cold temperatures, they burst pipes, they freeze things. Snow, heavy, weighs trees down, brings them down on houses. I mean, cold weather does this. It freezes everything. Hot weather, it'll do power outages. You could have heat stroke. You could be dehydrated. But, because of heat, trees aren't falling over on houses because of the heat. If anything, vegetation is dying. That's another impact as far as food and everything. But again, my point is, I think, not trying to be biased. I know we're talking about grand solar minimum, and that usually represents colder temperatures. But to me, it's almost obvious. It sticks out like a turd in a punch bowl when you're talking about cold-related deaths and heat-related deaths. And I'm not saying there weren't any heat-related deaths here in 2018. I'm just saying it wasn't enough to really talk about in the media as, they make an excuse in the beginning, I think. And I think it's just to be on the safe side. I get it. That, they're saying that it's difficult for these poor countries to register all the deaths and severe consequences caused by droughts and extreme temperatures. I get that. They didn't even want to touch a number on it. And that's how inconsistent the reporting is out there. But again, I still feel like that if the heat was a major death cause, it would still be mentioned. Just like in every paragraph here, volcanic, we've talked about people dying, floods, people dying, storms, people dying, earthquakes, people dying. Every part of this report is talking about deaths. So to me, I think it's an obvious, maybe it's a read between the lines, in my opinion. Read between the lines. We're not going to come out and say this, but read between the lines. Way more deaths caused by cold weather than hot weather. And we were talking about Sulawesi, Indonesia. Sulawesi. I think that's how you pronounce it. I apologize if I'm saying that. But deadly floods and landslides triggered by several days of heavy rain with at least 59 people dead. 25 are missing in the southern province of South Sulawesi here in Indonesia. January 25th, 2019. At least 47 people were injured and over 3,000 evacuated after heavy rain and strong winds hit South Sulawesi on January 23rd and 24th, causing rivers to burst their banks. Almost 5,000 homes were submerged and 79 damaged in 106 villages. In addition, at least 9 bridges were damaged or destroyed, and at least 11,000 hectares, which is about 29,000 acres of paddy fields, are under water. And more than usual, I should point out, not just a little bit. So for 2018, this part of the region was already mentioned for historic flooding, impactful events. These folks are on top of their houses waiting for help. Significant flooding there. And these are unfortunately sites that we've seen off and on throughout 2018 and now 2019. When I see stuff like this, and listening to people like that crazy Cortez chick who talks all this insanity about how the world is ending in 12 years, and to me, she's just mocking the reality of what's happening in our world right now. And you can argue warming, cooling all you want. Climate change has never been the denial on any side of the fence. What's causing it, and that is the main reason why we are on the air today, is because there's too much misinformation on what's causing this weather. Last night I discussed the possibility, the first real proof anyway, from climate change on other planets in the solar system. And I've always kind of felt that it's not just here on Earth that's experiencing changes. Mari and I attended a really interesting astronomy meeting 2 years ago in Buffalo. And this was 2017. And he presented us a slideshow of the solar system, and each planet of the solar system, he was able to talk about wind speed changes, atmospheric conditions changes, brightness of these planets in the solar system, all kind of weather type phenomena that was observed over the year of 2016 and moving forward. And so this is where I say that when we're in a solar cycle, it's not just Earth that's in a solar cycle. It's all the planets that are affected by this. All right? So, listening to this this little speech that this man was giving, this report, I guess we should say, it made me think. That's when I really started connecting the dots of grand solar minimum and how it's going to affect every planet in the solar system. So here's another piece of ammo for your debate when someone's trying to tell you that you're the cause of the climate change. And then ask them, why is there proof on Venus? And there is proof now. There's, research, studied, peer-reviewed paperwork that's saying Venus has experienced climate change. You ask that person who's telling you that you're causing this, you ask why is Venus going through climate change as well? What is causing the climate change? And I got sarcastic last night and was, saying that the CO2 is somehow affecting the Birkeland current and traveling throughout the solar system and causing other planets to have climate change. Just being ridiculous. But no, really, when you think about this, what is the cause of climate change? Is it man? The biggest question you ask people who blame man is, why are we starting to see climate change on all the planets in the solar system? Proof, Venus. Point them that way direction first. But then there are other presentations out there, like I said, that talk about changes on every planet. And these are recent studies. These are recent photos. So this solar cycle thing, the way it affects our solar system, this has been going on for a while now. Anyway, I'll leave the link in the description. I didn't mean to get off of track here, but it just made me think about where, you got people like Cortez who make a mockery of climate change. She doesn't have a clue about the science. She doesn't have a clue about the records. She doesn't have a clue about what's happening, what's changing in the weather right now. She has no idea. She's just throwing a bunch of word salad out there and trying to throw out tricky and catchy little words and phrases to get the masses' attention. It's confusing people. I don't understand what is the global warming scam that serious? Are people going to lose their lives if they get exposed? Is there that much guaranteed money out there that's at a loss if it's proved otherwise? It has to be. Why would anybody fight this hard for a lie like this? All right. Snow freeze up could make the parts of the northeastern and southern U.S. turn to a skating rink next week. Forget about next week. Try right now. This was literally me yesterday when we were getting the rain with the ice. Look at this. These shoes sliding down. Yeah, there's no traction on tennis shoes, folks. Not a good idea to wear in the ice. Try to get you some boots to walk, because I'm learning the hard way. I was walking to the car when tennis shoes, and our driveway is completely iced over, and I literally had to slide across the driveway. I did not walk, I slid. I literally was at a slow pace, balancing myself, sliding. So, but the ice is already here. Next week, widespread threat for snow and slippery travel across the eastern United States is taking shape for around Tuesday of next week, where there can be bouts of nuisance snow, heavier lake effect, squalls across the interior northeast this weekend. More of the region can face snow or a rapid freeze-up early next week. Again, rapid freeze-up is here. I did see some indications that the mid-30s are possible for the northeast and parts of the northeast, but then rapidly getting cold again, just like it did yesterday. It was 43 degrees outside, and by the end of the evening, we were looking at temperatures below freezing and dropping. And that's what's causing all the ice. AccuWeather meteorologists are still refining the exact details of how the storm will transpire in the Northeast, but residents should still prepare for potential disruptions to travel, classes, and other daily routines and activities. Residents of the Northeast will have problems on Tuesday. It is just the magnitude of what those problems will be. So there's still a lot of questions about how much we're going to get, which right now, and I'll go into this here in a minute, but we're looking at a decent amount for Tuesday and Wednesday. So I don't know. Scenarios for the Northeast. Arctic cold front is projected to sweep across the eastern U.S. I'll talk more about this here in another article. South, some snow may initially spread over southern New England. In this scenario, temperatures otherwise can surge, and it can rain for a time across most of the east. Even if rain just ends up from Boston to New York City and Washington, D.C., any wet spots can rapidly turn icy as temperatures plummet behind this front, and that's Tuesday into Tuesday night. Blizzard conditions may even develop in northern New England, he says. The storm may be mostly rain event for I-95 cities, but there still can be a changeover to snow and rapid freeze-up on the storm's backside. The major cities in the Northeast I-95 corridor can go from rain to a couple inches of snow and a skating rink by Wednesday morning, almost what it did here in upstate New York. And more talk about the polar vortex. I'll leave the link in the description here. Also, it says here, if cold air rushes eastward fast enough, the rain can also end as snowflakes in Augusta, Georgia, Columbia, South Carolina, and Charlotte and Raleigh, North Carolina. Just as a side note. And I wanted to share this real quick. Snow. More snow to southeast Michigan. Friday morning's temps are falling after a cool passage. That means the mid-upper teens falling into the lower teens. Breezy, so wind chills are near or below zero for the next several hours. Saturday's forecast. Here you go. Little snowmaker misses us to the south Saturday, so it looks like single-digit lows and teens. So very, very, very cold. But snowstorm on Monday, you guys are looking at about 3 to 6 inches. Now, I know you're Michigan folk. This is nothing, 3 to 6. But put that 3 to 6 inches of snow on top of this extremely cold temperatures that we're going to be dealing with here in the U.S. And so this would be a good time to talk about the polar vortex situation. I've heard a lot of people speaking about the polar vortex right now is going to rival next week what we had in 2014. Now I can tell you that the polar vortex happened earlier than January 25th in 2014. It actually happened right in the end of the first week into the middle of the month. Actually, we were still going through it on the 21st of January. -6 was the high for that day. I do remember that day very well, unfortunately. It says here, Friday, January 25th, the polar vortex was one of the most used words in 2014 in the weather world, and for a good reason. This winter became one of the coldest on record for many locations eastern North Carolina. The extreme cold held off until early January, but the weather pattern was brutal considering the South Ontario ice storm of December 2013 happened this season. Below, we dig into what polar vortex actually is, where it comes from, and how 2019 might rival 2014 year in the terms of cold, and perhaps even be colder. Because the description of the polar vortex is an upper level low pressure area lying over the Earth's poles. This is nothing new, it always has been there. There are 2 polar vortices in the Earth's atmosphere overlaying the north and south poles. Each polar vortex is persistent, large-scale, low-pressure zone that rotates counterclockwise of the North Pole, and beneath that lies a large mass of cold, dense Arctic air that sometimes flows south into North America. Talks about 2014 polar vortex outbreak. January 6th, it reached a low of -37. And that was cold records set in Hamilton, Ontario at -24. Winnipeg was where the -37 was. London, Ontario, -26. Toronto dropped below 19 degrees below Celsius, first time in 9 years. Temperature -22 Celsius. So cold that the Niagara Falls had the appearance that it had partially frozen over. Partially, meaning that the flow was still there from the water. But so here we're looking at, this is the 2013-14 polar vortex disruption. And I do remember this happening. The first one was in late December. I was living in Southwest Ohio, and it wasn't quite as cold as the one we got in January. January is where everyone's furnace system struggled to keep their homes at 60 degrees. The temperatures will begin to plunge in Manitoba. First on Saturday night, then quickly spread south and east. The core of coldest temperatures could be as low as -35 Celsius to -45 and northern Manitoba, northwestern Ontario. This, of course, will be before the wind chills factored in. On Sunday, the Arctic air will spread into the rest of Ontario with widespread negative 30s and negative 40s from the Hudson Bay to the coastline to cottage country. By Monday, the polar vortex will further move south into the Great Lakes region. Chicago, Detroit, Toronto, Buffalo will tap into this air mass as well. During the middle of next week, a second shot of cold air will dive into the region. Dangerous wind chills of negative 30 and negative 40 are expected for much of the week. Here's a chart demonstrating just how quickly you can get frostbite in these conditions. So if they're talking about negative 28 to 29 being high, skin freezes in 10 to 30 minutes. Okay, that's where school gets canceled. You have a moderate chance at negative 10, negative 27. Some areas may consider closing school for that. But I guarantee you, once you start talking about negative 28 degrees and wind chills, there will be no school for the children when the skin freezes in 10 to 30 minutes. As parents, you know how hard it is to get these kids to dress for the weather, that's for sure. The jet stream will dip so far into the south that there is a significant snow expected as far south as Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. On the Canadian side of the border, same storm will bring a swath of snow from the prairies to Quebec from Sunday through Tuesday. And we'll leave the link in the description. And still talking about the extremely cold weather so far here. 2019 cold has been the biggest story. The snow has been there as well. Europe, Austria, those areas have really seen the bulk of the snowfall this year. But I wanted to talk about Canada a little bit. Big winter stats already within 350 centimeters of snow. Negative 65 for a wind chill, guys. Just some Canadians were beginning to doubt if a true Canadian winter would ever arrive this year. It's now safe to say most of the parts of the country have experienced at least some of the season's wrath. Heavy snow, flash freezes, extreme cold alerts. We've seen it all. There are a couple of regions in particular, however, that are setting the bar high in terms of winter conditions. We are over 300 centimeters of snow already on the ground, and wind chills that are plunging into life-threatening territory. So, it is cold and snowy, and 350 centimeters of snow is over 11 feet, folks. HVGB, obviously, 167 centimeters. That takes the cake. And this is as January 22nd. Ottawa, 35 centimeters. Edmonton, 28 centimeters. The record of 167 centimeters was reported on January 22nd, making it the highest snow cover ever for that date. Here we go. Happy Valley, Goose Bay, which recorded 59.2 centimeters in just the last 2 days, has already seen 357 centimeters of snow since October, guys. There's your 11 feet of snow since October, and winter still got 2 more months up here. So HVGB is Happy Valley, Goose Bay, just to give you all heads up on that. Snowiest January to date is from 1985 when 235 centimeters was reported. Insane. As of January 22nd, here's the yearly averages. St. John's is 178 right now. 335 centimeters is the yearly average. So not that far, almost more than halfway to that point. Gander, 277 centimeters. Yearly average is 452. It looks like they're right in line to hit their average, maybe a little bit higher. But Happy Valley, Goose Bay here, HVGB, that's what I like to call it. 358 centimeters. Their average for the year is 428 centimeters. So there's a really good chance that big snow they got, that 59.2 centimeters in 2 days, is definitely the deciding factor of them crushing their yearly average. The excessive and relentless snow is one way to describe a wild and extreme winter in Canada, but what about an extended period with wind chill values of negative 65? Yes, folks, current temperatures right now in Canada, Baker Lake is at negative 41 Celsius. Negative 63 is the real feel. Negative 32 up north here in Iqaluit Negative 40 is the real feel. These are all in Celsius. Resolute, negative 31, negative 48 is the real feel. Yellowknife is negative 33, negative 45 is the real feel. Whitehorse, closer to the northwestern part of the United States, but still cold at negative 14, negative 24 is the real feel. So these are extremely temperatures. Baker Lake right now taking the cake, and with the Baker as a Kitchens, and right now the Kitchens is pretty cold up here. Extreme wind chill values of negative 55 to negative 65 over Kilovac, and the Melville Peninsula continues as a ridge of high pressure settles over the region. Wind chill values would generally remain in this range through the remainder of the week, potentially into the weekend. The next 2 months for this area here in Canada. All right, guys. Weather meteorologist Dr. Doug Gillum highlighted 2 distinct temperature patterns for the month of January and February across the country. Above seasonal temperatures are expected to dominate western Canada, with below normal temperatures dominating most of eastern Canada. In between, back and forth temperature swings should come close to offsetting each other, he says. We could say the dominant storm track saw above seasonal snow across Atlantic Canada this winter is certainly verifying, with snow totals elsewhere being expected near normal, which we showed you that. Some areas are looking at close to average. Some areas are looking at possibility of breaking their yearly average. This one might have a decent chance. St. John's might fall a little bit closer into the yearly average. So again, we're not saying that it's snowmageddon up here, but again, we are seeing increased numbers. And each year that we've covered this, we continue to see colder winters and snowier storms. And that has prevailed. Whether or not you think that this is qualifies for a cooling trend here, we've been talking about this cold spell for weeks. It's here. And right now it looks like it's lasting through the first week of February. There might be a chance of a February thaw, but we're way too far out to even talk about that. I'll leave the link in the description for this article, as well as just to kind of give you an idea. If it's this cold there, imagine what we could possibly also experience. And with that being said, we are expecting temperatures, the colder temperatures, to arrive late next week. And let's go backwards here. Start us off here. Saturday, light snow showers across the Ohio Valley into very northern parts of New York, near Watertown as well. Western Pennsylvania, all kind of quiet into Sunday. And then a little bit of a quick clipper comes through the Northeast. This is just a quick 1 to 3 inches, possibly Monday. And then a low pressure system crashing through the northern plains into Minnesota, which, by the way, they're in a snow drought, if you believe that. Yes, it's true. Minnesota in January is in a bit of a snow drought. But this storm slides in through the upper Midwest, and this is where I think Detroit will see the 3 to 6 inches right here, as this will be the heavier snow they've probably seen so far this year in southeast Detroit, southeast Michigan. Indiana will get your fair share. It'll start off as rain in Ohio, but as we go through Tuesday, that'll change over to snow. Look at the snow reaching all the way into Louisiana, parts of Texas even, Mississippi. As we move a little bit further into the future, more snow across as far as south as in the southern part of Mississippi, possibly even being in the Gulf region, folks. It could be cold enough in some of these Gulf coastlines to see the snow. And so this is turning out to be a pretty nice snowstorm here in the Northeast as well, and along the eastern seaboard. As it starts off as rain on the coastlines, the interior parts of the coast will see more snowfall, but there will be a change as well for places like New York City and DC. You will see this turn into snow by Wednesday, and much colder air. This is where we are looking at the really cold temperatures, and I'll go ahead and switch GFSs for you guys real quick to show you exactly where we're going to be temperature-wise on January 30th. And I'll just fast forward here. Here we are. January 30th is where we start to see the beginning of this polar vortex disruption. We can confirm now that we will see negative 40 temperatures in some spots of North Dakota, parts of Minnesota, negative 34, negative 35. Iowa, you're going to see close to negative 30, negative 35. Parts of Chicago, they're calling for negative 30 degrees. That is a possibility as well. So here's that first polar vortex disruption, and then another shot on Thursday before it retreats a little bit. So I'll go back to the precipitation now. It's kind of quiet. In the northwest, you get impacted with some light rain and snow in the upper elevations. Then a major low pressure system hits the coast, California, northwest, once again, inundating with floods and snow in the Sierras. And this storm is trying to get its act together. And here's where I see it's at the top of the slide. If the pattern continues, according to what we think here in the Grand Solar Minimum Channel, this low pressure system out here, and I'll go ahead and get the handy dandy arrow, this storm is going to be one to watch. And right now we're trending towards possibly warmer temperatures, and this storm could be seen out as rain in the beginning and change over to snow or vice versa. It's really too far out to know at this point. But right now, the trends show temperatures warm enough for rain in the northeast. Now this storm is almost 2 weeks out. There it's ending in heavy snow, but by then the damage done, the rainfall. But the question is, I've seen other forecasts for temperatures, and I'm not seeing what the GFS is seeing. But again, this is too far out really to have any confidence in. But there's an indication that that next major storm system, we could luck out here in Ohio, Pennsylvania, New York. And when I say luck out, this is rain instead of snow. And right now, a lot of areas are sitting with a lot of snow. But this is too far to be completely reliable at this point. This is just an idea that we're looking at right now. This storm could shift south, and in Ohio and Pennsylvania and New York in the northeast could be slammed by another 12 inches to 15 inches of snow. It's too early to tell, but this storm has plenty of time to get its act together. But as we get out of the first week of February, we start to see the action pick up a little bit more. A little quick clipper system moves in, and then we get another massive storm system across the Midwest. This one's a little bit further south. More snow for Nebraska, South Dakota, Minnesota. But this storm also takes a northerly track. And look at that. Once again, the Northeast is spared. And forecast models are saying that we are going to see rain on the second major low pressure system. Now, this third one here on February 8th, again, this could shift a little bit more north, or it could shift a little bit more south and just stay in the Atlantic states. But we are starting to see an increase of moisture from the south again, and we do start to see some more snow chances coming in from the north, Canada, and northwest. So, again, these are just ideas. Anything from February 1st and beyond is just a skeptical idea at this point. But as far as temperatures go, I'll show you where the GFS shows a drag. I mean, look, February 2nd, we're sub-zero temperatures in upstate New York. And some of the mainstream climate models are suggesting in just 48 hours we'll be 40 degrees warmer. In some cases, almost 50 degrees warmer in just 36 hours. So that's quite a warm front. And as you see in the future, that cold Arctic air is trying to keep that warmer air at bay, as we see some nice temperatures starting up for the south, 70s and 80s in Florida. And again, here we are, February 7th, indicating we might see 40-degree temperatures before another cold Arctic blast coming down once again. And models may suggest that we will see more strong cold for the second half of February from the same areas that we've seen so far in January with the snow and the cold. There's a look at our snow depth totals by February 3rd. Again, I think this is modest for some parts of the Northeast, but as far as shots of snow across Ohio, Indiana, Illinois, that looks about right. As far as the snow drop for Minnesota, those numbers are welcomed at this point. 7 to 8 inches is nothing for those folks up there. Michigan, you're going to get a little bit more snow than you've seen already this year. Definitely this will be the snowiest next 10 days for you so far of the winter of 2019. El Nino is now known as Al No-No, sitting at, and North Atlantic's drunk, sitting at a 0.335 degrees above baseline, still reporting at neutral conditions for the El Nino, Al No-No. Looking at our ice growth, look at that, guys. 2019, right now, we are sitting at 13.838 million square kilometers, 13.83 squared kilometers, million, in the millions. That is almost surpassing the growth that we've seen in 2012. and we had a much higher start-off rate in 2012. So the ice was actually losing in 2012. Right now here in 2019, we are gaining. Let's get you some perspective here. Look at the gap between 2018 and 2019. Look at that. That's significant. Compared to what we were talking about this time last year, how far below average the ice growth is, at least this orange line is a lot closer to that median. A lot closer than what it was last year. So if you want to ask me about the ice up north, it's drastically improved in the last 12 to 14 months. Drastically. Nothing new to report here. And that's going to do it for me as far as reporting on the articles. Mari, did you want to add anything before we sign off tonight?
I just want to say hello to everyone in the chat. We have a lovely group of people in the chat as always. Chat's been very interesting. We are sort of keeping on topic. We have the weather and we're talking about that kind of stuff, but interesting things about crystals and sound and vibration and electromagnetic funkiness, and it's just fascinating in the chat, Jake.
No, that's good, because when you talk about space weather and the effects it has on our planet and humans, these elements that you guys are speaking of in the chat are important as well.
Well, and I'm a big sound and vibration kind of person. I'm fascinated by the topic and the theories and the history of sound and vibration. There's so many different angles and facets to it. It's an interesting topic to me. So just love the chat. As always, just want to say hi and thank you. And some people are complimenting the site. They're enjoying it already. They want us to stream our videos on the web host, and I was explaining how expensive bandwidth is for how we use video. You're talking a few hundred, possibly more than that, a month. And
it's important to push out there too, folks, that YouTube, the small cons on YouTube is that they do make it easy to stream on their platform, versus if we wanted to do that on our website, like Mari says, it's cost. And it's cost that's keeping us. Maybe someday we'll get to that point where we can.
See where I'm definitely not going to do that this year, but we'll come back to it again next year and reassess it. And maybe if it's something we can do, we'll do it. But I definitely want to use the website as our main platform. And it's about ready to be officially launched, ribbon cutting ceremony and everything.
Scissors and all.
What do you think?
Sounds good.
I think it's close.
All right, guys, that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you for tuning in to our Friday evening edition, staying up late with us out there across the pond. Any of you that are out there, guys, we'll be back Sunday. And our guest, hoping everything is okay, but our guest Sunday evening at 7 o'clock Eastern Time here in the U.S. will be Henrik. And we will leave a link in the description on that show for his channel as well. But Henrik will be joining us again to discuss the global climate and other things that affect us when it comes to grand solar minimum conditions. That's going to do it for us tonight, guys. Thanks for tuning in. Please like and share, subscribe, check us out on Facebook, Twitter, and Patreon. We'll talk soon, folks. Stay safe out there and stay warm.